This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And welcome to A Different Perspective. I am, in fact, Kevin Randle. Normally, I would have notes and I would have a program plan, but all the notes are upstairs and I've had problems with my computer system. So we're going to kind of wing it today. There's a lot going on in the UFO field right now with people coming out with all sorts of, I'll say it, crazy stories. Things that I think are probably, shall we say, less than candid. I've got some real problems with some of what is being investigated. I'm upset with the way the Arrow investigation has gone because it reminds me of exactly what was going on in 1969 with the Condon Committee and Project Blue Book, and we seem to have not progressed any further than that. So we, and I say we, I mean Don Ecker, who's my guest, and he'll be on in just a moment, are going to talk about some of that and see what we can do about figuring out where we're going and what things are happening in the world of ufology or UAP or whatever they call it now in the world. So I guess we'll just move on. Don, welcome to A Different Perspective.
Very much. Appreciate it. Here, let me get my camera on. And,
caught you off guard.
Yeah, let me thank you, and let's see what the heck is happening.
Okay. My notes again are upstairs, and Don Ecker, of course, was the director of research for UFO Magazine. He's been around the UFO field for probably as long as I have, has participated in many types of investigations. Vietnam veteran like I am, former police officer, author of a science fiction novel, which I had written down so I could plug, but I'm not going to be able to do that now. I'll leave that to you.
Past Sins.
Okay, Past Sins, which is available on Amazon for those of you who would like to take a look at it. It's got vampires in it and blood-curdling attacks and all kinds of stuff. So there you go. You've, of course, been watching what's going on in the rush to disclosure in the last couple of years, starting with the Navy cockpit videos and the alleged leaks into the public arena and that sort of thing. The investigations with Arrow, NASA coming into it and all of that sort of thing. Where do you think we're going? Is that going to be helpful? Are we going to go anywhere with that, or are we going to just end up in the same place we've always been?
Well, to tell you the truth, Kevin, for a brief window after December of 2017, I had higher hopes in light of the press briefing that now deceased Senator Harry Reid gave in December of 2017, where he came out and he admitted that he had secured, in connection with a couple of other fellow senators, in excess of $20 or $22 million to begin a new program, classified program, at the Pentagon called the Aerial Threat Assessment Program. So I thought, boy, that's something I never would have believed that I would see. Back in the early 90s, when we were publishing UFO Magazine, I broke two rather huge stories involving unidentified objects in outer space. One of them was STS-48, where during a shuttle mission in September of 1991, they encountered a bogey and something appeared to shoot at the bogey. Now, notice I said appeared to shoot. Looking at it with my eyes, There was no mistake in my mind what I was witnessing. But of course, NASA immediately decried that, claimed that what we were actually seeing was frozen urine from a. Standing aside from that, another story I broke in November of '91 involved a Soviet Union probe from when there was still a Soviet Union called Phobos 2 that encountered something in Mars orbit where the former Soviet space agency, Glavkosmos, claimed that this object rammed their probe. Now, I would have thought that would have been at least one of two of the smoking guns that would have broken this wide open. Never happened. Now, in light of what's happened the last 6-7 years, once again, I look at this situation with disdain. Smoke and mirrors, dog and pony show, okay? The bottom line is that there is a core secret to this phenomenon, something that only a tiny handful of people ever truly had as much to know about it as was possible that knew about it. And this core secret is purportedly ensconced within a special access program. Now, what that means is, with the inclusion of an SAP, if you don't have a need to know, you never will. And the intelligence agencies, the CIA, the NSA, the NRO, the DIA, the ABCs, and the Girl Scouts of America, okay, are totally against anything becoming clean and out in the public. No, I don't think it'll ever happen.
So you think that this is kind of the same thing they did back in the 1960s with the Condon Committee, the University of Colorado study, which was supposed to make a scientific evaluation of the UFO evidence as it existed, and then present their conclusions. We now know, of course, that the conclusions were written before the contracts were signed and any money was spent. And the Condon Committee came to those conclusions and allowed the Air Force to shut down Project Blue Book, which I think for a period of time, most people thought, well, that's the end of it. There's nothing to it because Blue Book is shut down. Now we're to that point again where the Pentagon, the alphabet agencies you mentioned, the news media is now scrambling around again, pretending that this is all new and this is all different. But we're right to the same point where we were in the late 1940s. You don't think it's going?
You know from having been in Southeast Asia what a dog and pony show is, right? You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know what a dog and pony show is, and that's what this is developed into. There is absolutely something that they will go to the grave. Sheridan Cavitt, for God's sake, okay? A guy that you dealt with Roswell. Did that guy ever crack? Okay, no, he didn't. He was a damned liar to the day he died. Jesse Marcel, on the other hand, came forward.
Let me just explain one thing here, Don, so the audience understands. Yes, Sheridan Cavitt lied. We know he lied. He lied to us repeatedly about that. We can show it, but he was counterintelligence, and I think their training was such that no matter what we had, we could bring the body to him and show it to him, and he said, "I've never seen that before." He would deny everything. So, to be fair to Cavitt, he was living up to the oaths he had taken and his feeling of what he needed to do. So, yeah, he lied.
I understand that, Kevin.
Well, you understand it, but I want to make sure the audience does. Sure. You were going on with the liars then.
Well, yeah, but look, when I was in the military, when I was in Southeast Asia, I was involved with intelligence operations, okay? That's basically what my what my unit did. We did not work for the Department of the Army. We worked for the National Security Agency. All right. And the official line was my unit never even went to Vietnam, okay, which was pure hogwash. But sure, that was playing to the audience out there in the field. But the bottom line is, I understand Cabot. I understand that he held true to his oath to the very end. And, but then there are a heck of a lot of people we can point at and said that they saw this with the eyes of a bigger picture. Jesse Marcel was one, and many, many more after that. The Roswell case especially. Look, on the 50th anniversary of the Roswell event, all right, I was on a number of NBC nightly news programs. They approached me at UFO Magazine. And one of the programs I was on was the nightly news with NBC. And they showed a video taken from a press conference that day with an Air Force colonel. I forget what the heck his name was now, but they came out with a report, Roswell, Case Closed, that book. Now, they never released that book to the press or anyone else until weeks after the event. We got our copy of the report. As a matter of fact, it's in my office right now. And pouring through that book, the explanations and the things that the Air Force was using to explain away whatever it was that happened at Roswell were ludicrous. For example, on one of the pages, they had a photograph of a NASA probe from 1972. And they were trying to pass that off as, well, if I were driving out in the desert and I saw something like that, okay, yeah, I'd stop and I'd look at it and I'd wonder what it was. Yeah, no kidding, 1972.
Don, let me interrupt you there. We'll come back to this because I've got to take a break right now. And I, like you, I've got a copy of the book, and I've talked to Colonel Weaver, who was the man who was responsible for that. He was not the briefing officer you were talking about, by the way, because he wouldn't go in front of the cameras. He wanted somebody else to do that. I'm here with Don Ecker, the former director of research for UFO Magazine. My blog is at kevinrandle.blogspot.com, where you can find a bunch of articles that deal with this disclosure and that sort of thing. And of course, the book is Understanding Roswell. The other one is Roswell in the 21st Century. And I will be back right after this with Don Ecker. So please stick around.
Are you ready for a tale that will leave you on the edge of your seat? Get ready to dive into the gripping memoir by Bart Sibrel titled Moon Man. Bart Sibrel takes you on a heart-pounding journey, unmasking the truth behind America's famous Apollo missions. Prepare yourself for hair-raising encounters with agents from the U.S. government's top-secret agencies. In Moon Man, Sibrel fearlessly reveals his real-life espionage adventures, shining a light on one of the CIA's best-kept secrets. Brace yourself for shocking revelations, including Sibrel's discovery of privately recorded audio exposing an Apollo astronaut's chilling plot, a plot orchestrated by the CIA. That's right. As Sibrel unveils this groundbreaking evidence, it becomes clear that there is much more to the Apollo missions than meets the eye. Could it be that we've been deceived all along? Moon Man is a gripping page-turner that challenges everything you thought you knew. It's a mind-bending journey into the unknown, where the line between truth and fiction becomes blurred. Don't miss this opportunity to uncover the secrets hidden for decades. Let your curiosity guide you as you join Bart Sibrel on his quest to find the truth. Moon Man, available now at Sibrel.com. That's Sibrel.com. Prepare to have your beliefs shaken to the very core.
And I am here with Don Ecker. Don, before I bring you back up on this, I did want to mention one thing. One of the things I've been doing is I write action adventure books as well as science fiction and other things. And I had done a series back in the late 1980s, early 1990s called Vietnam Ground Zero. There's 32 or 33 books in that series. A new one has just been published, and you can go on to Amazon, find it. It's not in Kevin Randle, it's Eric Helm. It's called Pioneer Post. And what is interesting about it is it's based on an event in Vietnam that I actually took place in, that I was there for. My role was very minor, but it was kind of an interesting thing. So it might be something that people would like to take a look at. And I thought I'd use this moment to plug the book for no reason whatsoever. Anyway, Don Ecker is here. We were talking about the, I guess, the deceit we find in the big Air Force report, Roswell. It's not case closed. It's a fact versus fiction in the New Mexican desert. It was in response to, I guess, Senator Schiff from New Mexico wanting to get additional information about the Roswell case, and it was all an outgrowth of that. But it's a document that's very valuable to us as UFO researchers, because, Don, you were pointing out one of the problems. One of the things that is important in that is we have a complete listing of all the Project Mogul flights. We know where they were, how they were constructed, and what happened to them. So we can refute the idea that it was a Project Mogul balloon. But, Don, you were talking about some other things that you found in that report that were also less than true.
Yeah. As we do today's show, okay, on June the 5th, we are one day from the 80th anniversary of the D-Day Normandy invasion by the Allies to dislodge the Nazis out of France and ultimately Germany. One day, tomorrow, 80th anniversary. Now, my old man, my father, was in the third wave that went into Utah Beach, okay? Later on, in December, he was up in Brussels, and what the heck he was doing up there, I'm not sure. But when the Nazis launched their operation, I think it was called Watching the Rhine or something like that, on the 16th of December, he was hustled down to the Battle of Bastogne. Now, I can just imagine if I would have suggested to him that his memory was all faulty and they actually were fighting in the summertime. Now, why do I even say something as crazy as that? Well, the Air Force said something as crazy as that in their Roswell case closed. These witnesses that came forward claiming they saw bodies from this object that impacted the Earth, no, they were all wrong. It actually were anthropomorphic dummies that the Air Force was dropping in 53, 54, okay? Now, I can imagine if I went to my father when he was still with us and I said, you know what, Pop? You're all wet. That didn't really happen. I got the Air Force report right here. He'd have booted me right out through the front door, okay? So this is the kind of crap. Look, they depend upon, and unfortunately today it's true, the ignorance of so many people and so many people willing to take the government line, no matter how ridiculous. Now, you mentioned the Condon Committee report, okay? Now, I can remember I was on my way to college when all this was happening. I can remember that pretty vividly because I was very interested in what was going to shake out of that. Because I had had an extraordinary sighting of the phenomenon, whatever it is, in 1966. So yeah, I had a great interest in it. Now, later on, as I did a lot of research, when I became the director of research for UFO Magazine, I went back and I scoured historical files from that period. And I saw something that was very interesting. And I wonder how many people were aware of this? Now, Edward Condon was the guy that was picked and accepted the job of being the chairman of this committee, okay, that was examining UFO cases. And initially, all right, the various UFO research organizations that were there was all for it. They offered anything and everything they could do to help Condon and the committee along. And I'm talking primarily about NICAP, National Investigative Committee Aerial Phenomena, and APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, which, Kevin, you were a part of. Now, then something happened. And when I discovered this, I said, oh boy, the fox really got in to the hen house. One of the project executives, Robert Lowe, had written a memo, okay, to some of the other people on the board, basically saying, look, the trick is going to be making, and I'm paraphrasing now, okay, but the trick is going to be making everybody think that we're a group of scientists entering into this with zero expectations of actually finding anything, but basically we don't want to blow our cover, okay? And once again, I'm paraphrasing. Well, when that became public back in, I think it was like 67, 68, the whole thing blew up. And there was a tremendous amount of press interest in it at that time, into what the heck was going on. But Condon, who was the epitome of a con man, okay, never did 1 minute's worth of, I'm talking about himself, 1 minute's research into what actually was going on. In one example, okay, the people that Condon zeroed in on were the contactees. They were his favorite buffoons and clowns. And in one case, Condon had one of these contactees tell him that at a certain place, at such and such a time, the ETs, the aliens, were going to come down in a flying saucer and land. So what did Condon do? He went out, he grabbed himself a high school marching band, took them out to this place, ready to play when the aliens landed. He regarded the whole thing as a joke. But when they finally shut this down, at the end of the Blue Book, or at the end of the Condon Committee activity, and they finally shut it down, they rushed to get it closed. They had a hurried press briefing. And even then, over 30% of the cases they did look at were never explained by anybody. Okay.
Well, I always like to say there's one case in there that was solved. They said it was a natural phenomenon so rare it had never been seen before or since.
Right.
And I'm thinking, if that's true, then this would be something of scientific value to look at. But to kind of append to what you were saying, there was the letter exchange between Robert Hippler, who was the one of the contacts from the Air Force to the Condon Committee, and Robert Lowe, who was the man you were talking about. And Hippler said, you know, here's what we want you guys to find: that the Air Force has done a good job, that there's no evidence of alien visitation, and that we should stop the investigations because nothing of a scientific value will be learned. And Lowe wrote back, sure, well, we can do that. It's exactly what they found. And I've got copies of those letters, those documents on my blog that you just type in Hippler letter, and you can read all about it there. So you can understand what's going on. But the Condon Committee was designed to end interest in UFOs by explaining everything.
there's one more fact that most are not aware of. Back in the very early 50s, there was the Great Red Scare. Communists infiltrating Hollywood, communists infiltrating the government. And as a result of this Red Scare, the Congress started the House on Un-American Activities examination. Okay? And at that time, Dwight Eisenhower was president. Richard M. Nixon was vice president. Nixon took part in the House on Un-American Activities investigation. One of the people that was examined and was basically run into the wall was, guess who? Edward
U. Condon.
Condon. And here is what most people are not aware of. In '68, Richard Nixon finally won the presidency. Now, say what you want to about Richard Nixon. One thing you can never take away from him: he never forgot an enemy, okay? And he saw Condon as an enemy. The great fear was that Nixon, they had to get this thing shut down before Nixon took over in January of '69, because just out of spite, Nixon might jump into this fray just to embarrass Condon. And as a result, they closed it up. The Air Force got out of supposedly the UFO business, shut down Blue Book, except nobody told the UFOs. They never went away. As a matter of fact, if anything, they got even more visible in the sky. So anyway, Kevin, I wanted to mention that.
Well, let me get ready here, because we're going to have to take a break in just a minute or so. One thing I wanted to point out, and it's up on my blog at the very top of the blog, there was a sighting in Baltimore, Maryland, that if you go through the sighting, they've got the date wrong, they've got the witnesses wrong, they've got all the facts wrong. They said it was a hoax, and yet the evidence turns against it. It's from, I think it's labeled as March 25th, 1952. The actual sighting took place on March 14th, 1952. They label it, part of it is April 19th. So it's a case that's very interesting. And for those of you, take a look at it. It's at the top of the blog. It's the Baltimore UFO sighting from that time. It is just a good example of the Air Force not really doing the job they're supposed to do and not carrying it out to the end. We're going to come back here, and I think we're going to move a little bit into current events now with what's going on with disclosure and all the investigation, alleged investigations, I should say, going on around UFOs and how all of that is shaking out. Once again, my blog is at kevinrandle.blogspot.com. You can take a look at that stuff there, and take a look at Roswell in the 21st Century, which is the book that explains an awful lot of what Don has been talking about as well. We will be back right after this.
Welcome to Haunted Indian River County by Larry Lawson. Indian River County is an idyllic vacation spot on Florida's east coast, not far south of Cape Canaveral. Known as part of the state's famed Treasure Coast, many are unaware of the deep and fascinating history this area played in the development of the Sunshine State. Also lost among its visitors and residents are the chilling stories of the hauntings that accompany this rich history. It is here that a man named Waldo still looks after his family and properties, 6 decades after his death. Or a retired preacher is seen digging up his hidden treasure, days after he died. Larry Lawson spent more than 40 years in the law enforcement and criminal justice education profession. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Nova Southeastern University and a master's degree in public administration from Troy State University. He serves on the board of directors of the Indian River County Historical Society, is the director of the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation, and is the owner of Indian River Hauntings, LLC, where he provides historical and paranormal tours and events. He has been actively researching the history and paranormal legends of the Treasure Coast of Florida since 2010. Larry is currently the host of Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show on the Exozone broadcast network and the past host of Encounters with the Other Side on WPSL Radio in Fort Pierce, Florida. Pre-order your copy of Haunted Indian River County by Larry Lawson on Amazon.com today.
And we are back here. We were talking about Condon Committee and some of the history of the deceit that surrounds the UFO field. And I think that we could go into great detail and present document after document showing how the investigations were bungled. They were just shuffled aside. The Air Force and the skeptics are proud of saying, well, they investigated UFOs under Project Blue Book, and they only were unable to explain 701 of them. And you can probably write that off as not having enough information to get to the bottom of it had they had better data. But in a survey I took of the Project Blue Book files, I found between 4,000 and 5,000 were listed as insufficient data for a scientific analysis, which means there's no explanation for it. But it's not in that unidentified category, which was the one they wanted to stay away from. So literally half of the sightings were not explained. That's in the past. I think it's important to understand the past to understand what's going on now. Now, Sean Kirkpatrick, who was the head of Arrow for a period of time, issued a report a few weeks ago, I believe, 64 pages of what his findings were. I'm sure you've taken a look at that report, Don.
Yes.
What were your conclusions from that?
You want me to take the roundabout tour or the short and sweet one?
I think short and sweet would be very nice.
He's a damned liar.
Or is he just ill-informed and worked very hard to be ill-informed?
That's possible too. But Kevin, I don't like to beat around the bush. Look, I've been watching this same type of activity for as long as I've been professionally involved in this field. Now, hey, look. He's not the only guy that speaks. I'll play along with you. Untruths. Okay. He's not the only guy. Hey, we've had more than our share on this side of the fence speaking untruths. But
you don't mean people like Frank Kaufman, do you, or Glenn Dennis? I just thought I'd throw that. Yes.
Yeah. Or Calvin Carlton Korff.
We'll get to him in a minute. Anyway, you were talking about him speaking untruths, Sean Kirkpatrick.
Look,
and his report.
People like David Grouch, all right, has come forward, testified before Congress under oath, took in closet testimony, okay, behind closed doors. If this guy were knowingly speaking lies, all right, they could hang him out to dry. I mean, really hang him out to dry. Granted, although he did say that he had no firsthand information, but he did have tons of secondhand information he was given by allegedly firsthand participants. And he offered to give Congress their names behind closed doors. Now, I am sure he did. But some of the things that he did say publicly figured greatly into a paper I wrote a few months ago. You read it. As a matter of fact, you had it on your blog. Disclosure, a dangle too far. This was a paper I was driven to write, where I came to the conclusion about the UFO UAP topic having a core secret that nobody, at least officially, is aware of. And this core secret is surrounded by a special access program designator, which means if you're not on the bigot list, if you're not in the book, you don't get to see anything, okay? Now, purportedly, that even happened to a former director of the DIA, okay, who had been convinced by a number of people, one of them being Edgar Mitchell, the sixth American astronaut to walk on the moon, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, to see what he could shake out within the inner corridors of the Pentagon. And according to notes discovered in Edgar Mitchell's effects after he died, he found a paper that had been written down by a physicist who had interviewed this admiral. By the way, the admiral's name is Thomas Wilson. And basically, according to the notes that this guy got from Wilson, was sitting in the parking lot in a parked car at EG&G in Las Vegas. And if you know anything about a guy named Bob Lazar, you'll have heard EG&G before. But Wilson allegedly told this guy that he contacted a aerospace corporation out here on the West Coast, and they refused to talk to him over an unsecured telephone line. They said, if you want to talk to us, you've got to come out here. So Wilson allegedly flew out, was taken to a secure vault where he began asking these people questions. The security administrator pulled out his copy of the bigot list. That's a list of names with people with a need to know or access to certain secret programs. Went through it, didn't find Wilson's name, and in effect said, sorry, Admiral, we can't help you. You're not in here. Have a nice trip home. Well, purportedly, Wilson left enraged, flew back to D.C., was allegedly going to raise some holy hell, and somebody with a cooler head pulled him aside and reminded the Admiral, well, you know, you're going to be retiring soon. I'll bet you'd like another star on your collar before you leave. And I'm sure you're looking forward to your pension. And if you do this, all of that is at risk. Well, Wilson calmed down. And now he denies it. He denies any of it. Now, why would he deny it? Well, very, very, very briefly, because Wilson has knowledge of a special access program. And under federal statute, if you do have knowledge of it, you might not even know what the heck it is, but you know that there's a program. It's a felony for him to even mention that. So he would have no choice but to lie. Okay. Now that's something hard for a lot of civilians to understand, but that's the real world, and that's how it works.
Well, I would say in defense of David Grush that he's reporting information he believes to be true.
Yes.
As you mentioned, he had no firsthand knowledge. It was secondhand sources. I'm thinking Don Schmidt, Tom Carey, me, you, Stan Friedman, all talked to people, especially around Roswell, who had firsthand knowledge that said, yes, I saw this, I did this, I was there to do that, without any repercussions. I think of Edwin Easley, probably the only person to talk to him. He was a provost marshal in Roswell in 1947. And I asked him at one point, are we following the right path? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, we think it's extraterrestrial. And he said, well, let me put it this way. It's not the wrong path, which is in essence telling us we're going in the right direction. So we mentioned those witnesses. The other thing that I know is Grush was at Skinwalker Ranch once or twice. And some of the people, the high level people, the high energy people, the people who are supposedly on the inside that know about this stuff were there as well. So I think again, on my blog, I have talked about, here's the cases I think that he might have heard about from these people, but he had no way to verify them and had no way to check them. And he hasn't done that, but he heard it from people that he thought would be on the inside and would be in the know about these things. And I can guess what some of those cases are, which I've done. But I think what Grush would be the useful idiot that we talk about sometimes. He knows just enough to get himself into trouble. You agree?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Look, you know, Kevin, I don't know what is actually happening. I don't think any of us do. But I was a criminal investigator. And when I really bore into this, I used that mindset that sometimes if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and water runs off its back, chances are it's a duck, okay? Now, with this core secret and this SAP surrounding it, I wrote a paper about what one aspect I believe is behind this. And another one, the other aspect, and I'll mention it, but I'm thinking about doing a paper on that also. So when I started writing this, the whole disclosure thing, I saw the ins, the outs, I saw the tantalizing tidbits, and I saw others trying to pull back. And I thought to myself, well, let me go back and watch David Grush again. He said a few things that really fascinated me. And one of the things he said, and this is where I put my detective hat on, he said, well, I've been told we have at least a dozen, possibly more, off-world vehicles that crashed. Now, Kevin, our technology today is pretty damn far from what we had in World War II. And think about World War II. In World War II, when the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor in 1941, the United States Army still had actual horse cavalry troops, boots and saddles. Not a heck of a lot different from what George Custer rode to the Little Bighorn in 1876. But from that point until July 1945, we literally went from horse cavalry to atomic bombs in 4 years. Now think about that. And we defeated in those 4 years, of course, with a lot of help from the Brits, the Russians, you name it, 2 major fascist governments and their militaries, Germany and Japan. Now, here we are 80 years later.
Don, you're going to have to hold that thought. I got to do a break here. We'll come back to that when we come back. And we'll talk about maybe Kal Korff's sudden reappearance on the UFO field, which affects you and affects me as well in some fashion. Okay. Once again, the blog is kevinrandle.blogspot.com. It's called A Different Perspective. Take a look at my book on Levelland, my book on Socorro, which will help you understand that. And we will be back right after this.
Are you interested in evolving with the times and becoming all you can be? Don't you wish there was one place to find the latest information to help guide you through the process? I'm Ecker, host of Mission Evolution Radio TV. Join me on my mission to find the latest evolutionary knowledge and tools. The guests on Mission Evolution are leading experts in a wide variety of divergent topics, including allopathic, holistic, and integrative medicine, epigenetics, enlightenment, quantum physics, meditative practices, environmental issues, spiritual evolution, trauma healing, and so much more. Mission Evolution Radio TV is aired worldwide through the X-Zone Broadcast Network, X-Zone TV Channel 32 on Simul TV. You can enjoy our archives of radio or TV shows with our compliments at www.missionevolution.org. Come see the amazing lineup of guests and topics. With more than 200 episodes to choose from, you're sure to find what you're looking for. Visit www.missionevolution.org.
And we are back with Don Ecker. I keep wanting to say Don Schmidt. Of course, there's Don Burlinson and several other Dons involved in this UFO conversation.
Tax sergeant on that, and that'll keep us
separated.
Yeah.
Well, you were talking about the amazing scientific advancements made from the beginning of the Second World War to the end of the Second World War, and where we are now having this conversation, you at your home, me at my home, the studio, and still another place,
right.
Which is amazing technology. We can bring all that together. And
what I was getting at, okay, is during Grush's testimony, he mentioned that from what he was told by people that know, we have in our possession a dozen or more off-world vehicles. Now, Kevin, I'm thinking about this. If any of those alleged vehicles came from another star system, imagine the technology that is behind that, okay? That's number one. Does it make sense that if they came here from another star system, that suddenly they would crash? No, it never made sense to me. Okay, maybe one, possibly two, but a dozen or more? What did make sense to me? And I think it would make sense to you. In Vietnam, okay, during the war, we lost literally thousands of aircraft of all types, everything from bombers to helicopters, fighter jets, you name it. They were shot down. And suddenly, the story I broke in 1992 from an event that happened in 1991, STS-48, made sense to me. And I was aware, well, as the director of research at UFO Magazine, as you can imagine, we saw a lot of stuff that never made it into the magazine. There was sometimes literally just too much. And I had an investigator originally from the Soviet Union, when there was still a Soviet Union, by the name of Paul Stonehill. And Paul was one of our correspondents that wrote frequently for UFO Magazine. One day he called me up. He lives out here in the Southern California area. He called me up. He had been talking to a investigator, a scientist, by the way, in the former Soviet Union, now the Russian CIS. And this person told him about reports he had received coming in from Siberia, all right, where witnesses had witnessed these unknown objects apparently engaging in aerial combat, flashing lasers or God knows what at one another. And these people were by necessity freaked out. Now, if any of that is true, and if we do have a dozen or more off-world vehicles that came down somehow, then I began thinking, my God, Phobos 2, STS-48, other cases, all right? And suddenly I began to think, what if there is conflict going on between two or more factions of these visitors in our solar system? And what if our government was in the know about this? This would by necessity be something that they definitely would never leave out. Now, you read my paper. Did you follow my logic in that?
Yes, I did.
Where do you come down on that?
I wonder about their conducting that war in our solar system. It doesn't seem that they would be fighting that far away from their home world, wherever they might be. But then you could think,
who's to say? I mean,
World War II. You could take a look at World War II, and we fought the war quite a ways from our own shores.
No, we
very
didn't.
few temples.
No, we didn't. We had action in the Gulf of Mexico with U-boats. We had action off of Atlantic City, New Jersey, for God's sake, with U-boats. We had ships sunk within sight of the continental United States. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of the war, Kevin, they didn't even have city blackouts initially. I mean, ships would be sailing along down in the Gulf, Mexico, that were highlighted against a background of cities there until they finally got their act together. But yeah, now as far as enemy action here, well, we had some, okay? We had a Japanese submarine surface off the shore trying to shell an oil refinery. We had Japanese Fugo balloons come over with bomb loads on them, trying to start massive forest fires. But when it came to actual enemy troops, no, we didn't have that. But we sure had a lot of other stuff.
Well, but it's all around one planet. We really need to move on here, because I think I wanted to get to this latest Kal Korff nonsense. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it. He was about to sue you again for calling him names.
Look, that was from years ago. I had been invited, okay, on a guy's radio show to talk about, of course, the UFO topic. And somewhere during the course of that show, he was taking questions from the audience. They were writing them and sending them in. And one question came from a guy I immediately recognized, Art Levine, okay, who I know is an associate of Korff. And he wanted to know my take on Corey Good. Okay. Now, I gave my take on Corey Good, like I told you earlier, short and sweet. All right. Now,
let me interrupt. Don, let me interrupt just a minute. Corey Good was this guy who claimed, I believe it's this guy, who claimed that he was abducted as a teenager out of his bed, fought a war on Mars for 20 years.
Child. He was 5 years old.
Okay. And then after the 20 years of service, he ended up back in his bed 15 minutes later at his original age. So time travel, all kinds of things going on there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So anyway, so this host got another question in that he never put on screen, and it was from Kal Korff. Now, this guy, this radio host, didn't have a clue who Kal Korff was. And I gave him at the end of the show, after we were off the air, a short primer on this guy. And I don't know if he believed me or not, but I said, hey, it's easy enough to look up. So anyway, I screen captured. He sent me this thing. I screen captured it, and it's going back to 2008, 9, 10, when Korff was going around in his make-believe soldier suit where he was a captain and then promoted all the way up to colonel in the Israeli-founded Special Secret Services. The huh? What? The who? And it was an organization that he put in his own little mind, all right? And nobody, obviously, I mean, you looked, nobody could find any mention of this anywhere. And the guy is a fantasist. He's, in my humble opinion, now look, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychoanalyst. I never even played one on TV. But when I was a cop, occasionally I would have to play one on the street. And my amateurish readout of this guy is he's mentally ill. He's insane, okay? He's bouncing off of walls. And I don't want to go into the whole thing, but I did 2 radio shows on this guy. And as a matter of fact, you were interviewed on both of them because you were somebody this guy was gunning for too. And I got to say, I really humiliated the hell out of him. Then this guy impersonates a lawyer sending me legal threats via email, okay, from an anonymous server with this lawyer's name on it and his address and his phone number. And when I saw that, I said, oh boy. So I called this guy up, all right? And I left a message on his answering machine. Within an hour, he calls me back. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, I'm not surprised. And then I gave him the rundown on this lunatic, all right? And so, yeah, this guy kind of went underground for a while. There's a website dedicated to him. And if you put this in your search engine, you can find it. It's called Kal Korff, K-A-L-K-O-R-F-F, is an idiot. All right. That's the website devoted. Now, it's not mine, but it's devoted to this guy. And you can go back literally through the years to 2008 and see some of the lunacy this guy has done. So,
well, let me point out one thing, Don. The reason I brought this up is if it was that old, I wouldn't bother with it. But just in the last week or 10 days, he's put up a note that he's going to sue you for all kinds of slander and whatnot. A couple of months before that, he said the same thing about me, and of course, nothing has ever come from it.
And it never will.
Absolutely. And you can take a look at his whole claimed history. You left out that he had an IQ of 219, that he was instrumental in the O.J. Simpson trial. He has a contract for 500 books that he's working on. They haven't shown up yet. He was given $25 million to produce a documentary series.
From an Arab sheik.
Yes, was about to say that. The Saudis funded this sort of thing. So he's come up with all these sorts of things, and that's kind of where we are. Don, and that's why I brought it up now, because I thought we'd kick the sleeping dog because somebody has to. But we're out of time here. Anything you would like to say in the last 30 seconds?
Yeah. My radio show called Dark Matters Radio airs on Monday afternoons on KGRA DB, and it starts at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 Eastern. And on Thursday, there's a show which actually Kevin guested on once called UAP Crossfire, where we take a in-depth look and sometimes get a little rough and ready on items and points that develop in the UFO UAP field. That starts at 5 p.m. on Thursday, Pacific time, 8 on the East Coast.
Hey, Don, thank you so much for taking time. I know this was a little bit crazy because of issues at my end with the computers and the internet and whatnot. But I thank you for taking time to showing up. We'll be in touch. Once again, I think we need to take a look at my blog, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Take a look at my books on Amazon, and I will be back shortly with another program about UFOs, I suspect. So thank you for tuning in.